Among the words getting convenient, expanded, politically opportunistic redefinitions lately, you can now add incitement to the list. That's the accusation against the president after last week's Capitol raid. Both the federal prosecutor for D.C. and the D.C. Attorney General are floating the idea of prosecuting Trump for inciting the mob that marched to the Capitol. And of course, that's also now the premise for the forthcoming impeachment too, not necessarily electric, but potentially the cause of the boogaloo. House Democrats probably won't even read their single article of impeachment before Wednesday's vote. It might as well accuse Trump of being a poo-poo head or a stupid orange face, but it doesn't. It says Trump incited the lawless action at the Capitol because he said, quote, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." Well, if that's a statement of incitement, somebody call the web developers over at the DNC. No more fight for 15, because that's incitement. This recklessness has caused far too much fast food violence. No more fight for LGBT equality either. That's caused enough GameStop displays to be destroyed.
It is ma'am.
I apologize now.
And certainly no more fight to end discrimination, because that one actually has been a recurring physical fight that left many cities in ashes and ruin. Oh, well, that's not fair. That's not the same, you might say. Trump's speech more immediately resulted in crime, perhaps, but in order to reach that conclusion that Trump incited crime, not only do you have to ignore that reality that fight is a commonly used word in political and legal contexts, but you also have to ignore Trump's other words in the same speech that clarified his intent. During the speech, Trump said, quote, "We will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." It's telling that the incitement had to be surgically selected from the speech and transformed to make the case, but that's exactly it. The case was going to be made regardless. So it's not about what Trump said. It's just about Trump saying anything at all that preceded a crime. That's the morphing definition of incitement now. You say a thing, a crime happens later, we plausibly connect that crime to your words, and boom, we have a politically useful weapon. But it's not as though that opportunity is new. It's not as though the idea of trying to control opposition speech by connecting it to crime is something invented this week. This is exactly the sort of thing that the First Amendment and the free speech philosophy behind it are designed to protect against. And it's exactly why the Supreme Court settled this question decades ago. So it's a great moment to take time for a quick refresher on what incitement actually means. The next time someone throws around that term loosely, we should know its actual definition and what the rules are. Because if you think Trump's speech last week was bad, consider what the Supreme Court unanimously protected under the First Amendment to set the ruling precedent. The court's incitement doctrine was established in the 1969 case of Brandenburg versus Ohio. And while it's fashionable to call Trump a grand wizard, Clarence Brandenburg in this case was an actual KKK member. Brandenburg invited a local TV station reporter to his neighborhood Klan meeting in Hamilton County, Ohio, and the reporter put together a video story. In this video, Brandenburg and a dozen of his fully hooded friends armed with guns advocated sending N-words back to Africa and Jews back to Israel, and they warned of what they will do to N-words, how they will bury them, and how N-words will have to fight for every inch from now on. And related to the present, Brandenburg also said that if the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court of the United States continue to suppress the white race, it's possible that there might have to be some revengeance taken. I didn't even know that was a word. Revenge plus vengeance. Reminds me of an old Simpsons quote.
There's nothing like revenge for getting back at people.
I don't know. Vengeance is pretty good.
And I guess both is even better. Anyway, so in Brandenburg, you crank up the racism to 11. You crank up the threats to 11. If Trump committed incitement last week, that absolutely had to be incitement, right? No, actually, that was protected speech, and uncontroversially so, at least at the time. The court was unanimous, with even Thurgood Marshall, the court's first black justice, deciding that mere advocacy of violence or crime is not sufficient to lose First Amendment protection. Punishing simple advocacy of anything in general terms would criminalize speech and assembly in sweeping ways. So for incitement to be outside the scope of the First Amendment's protection, the court decided the standard must be much more specific. So incitement means two things. One, the speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, so a specific crime that will happen immediately. And two, the speech is likely to produce such an action. Incitement doesn't mean saying, hey guys, isn't crime cool? Incitement means here's a specific crime you should commit, and here's an immediate opportunity to do it. And maybe Trump did have opportunity. There was crime committed after all, that's granted, but there was no specific crime advocated. In fact, it was the opposite. Crime was advocated against. And it's crucially important that we maintain that strict standard, even if we view it as dangerous, for many reasons. First, because the more we encroach on the natural battle of ideas that separates the good ideas from the bad ideas, the more we obscure the truth. The truth will no longer be a tested idea discovered by defeating all the other ideas in open competition. The truth will simply be whatever those with power declare it to be. But second, it's important for self-interest. Protecting your neighbor's rights, even if you don't like his exercise of them, ultimately means protecting your own. And inversely, cracking down on your neighbor excessively will mean excessive crackdowns on you. Punishing speech that you don't like will lead to punishing speech that you do. And that's not hypothetical. There are plenty of cases that now need prosecution according to this new looser standard. Because let's not forget, Bernie Sanders accused Republicans of killing people with their healthcare bill in spring 2017. And about a month later, a former Bernie campaign volunteer shot up congressional Republicans, seriously injuring a congressman, an aide, a Capitol policeman, and a lobbyist. A year prior, President Obama said police shootings of black people were not isolated incidents, that they're symptomatic of broader issues, and that change has been too slow, so we need a greater sense of urgency to fix it. And then hours later, a man who told police he was upset about Black Lives Matter issues shot and killed 5 cops to speed up the change. In a viral clip 2 years ago, Maxine Waters shrieked that Trump cabinet members should be confronted and harassed in public.
You get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
There is no harassment more insufferable than just listening to that clip itself. But of course, those words also came to fruition. Maxine gave that speech just after then Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was harassed at a restaurant. And it's a tactic that's been recurring ever since against known supporters of the president, and even to bully random people into BLM raised fist compliance. Now, is the answer to prosecute the speakers in all of these cases? No. The answer is to prosecute the criminals and leave the speech alone. Because even if we hate the things being said, we still value the right to say what we believe above everything else, including punishing our political opposition. That is the value that the Supreme Court upheld, and that's the value that we must hold in ourselves if that precedent has any hope for survival. Which brings me to one interesting legal question that will have to be addressed as this new impeachment process develops. If the president couldn't be prosecuted for this speech because it's constitutionally protected, how can Congress impeach him for it? Phrased another way, can Congress impeach a president for constitutionally protected behavior? Sure, it's not a traditional criminal prosecution, and sure, it's not Congress making a law in the way the First Amendment describes, but it is Congress punishing someone for exercising a constitutional right. Is that legal, and how would that question be settled? There's a great piece over in Reason magazine considering this question. Some things to note. There is nothing that says the impeachment process has to follow Supreme Court precedent on rights. Indeed, many argued Trump didn't even have due process rights last time around. So there's nothing stopping members of Congress from saying either they think Brandenburg was wrongly decided or they don't think Brandenburg's First Amendment protections applied to the president. So it sounds like the constitutional answer is just Congress can do whatever they want because there is no appeal process. Once the Senate convicts, that's it. That's final. There's no chance for the Supreme Court to weigh in anyway. So if we don't like what our members of Congress are doing, it's up to us to fix the problem and replace them. And that really is the fundamental issue here, because we can cite and defend Supreme Court precedent all day. And to the extent its definitions are being distorted, we should be prepared to do that. But reciting language from some 50-year-old piece of paper doesn't mean much if we don't actually value it ourselves and elect people who value it the same. If members of Congress trash the Constitution by impeaching a president for exercising his constitutional rights, it's not on somebody else to defend the Constitution for us. It's on us to defend it ourselves, at least as long as that word is still allowed. Because if you can't say fight, It's only a matter of time until you can't say defend either, and that's where this path leads. If any speech that can be tangentially connected to crime is banned, then any and all speech will be banned. So we can easily and wisely predict that lesson now, or we can learn it in silence later. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.